The title of this shir is Zecher Migdash and Zecher Churban. These are two phrases which are, of course, very contemporary. We're in the middle of the period of the 3 weeks. But I wonder if anyone has thought about the difference between the two. What exactly is Zecher Migdash? What is Zecher Churban? Are they different? Are they synonymous? So we'll explore it in the hope that we'll understand this topic better and experience a more meaningful 3 weeks. The starting point is a Mishnah in Sukkah. If you're listening online, please email me j.golker@gmail.com. I'll send you the handout. Much of what I'm going to say, of course, is on the sheet, but I've heard many years ago from Rabbi and he touched on this topic and I explored it more, and it's presented here. So if you look at the first box, the Mishnah in Sukkah, it's recorded in the Gemara and Daf Mem Aleph, says the following. Originally, in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, the lulav was taken, Arba Minim was taken all 7 days of Sukkot. Over Medina Yom Echad, but it was only taken outside of the Beis HaMikdash in the Medina, throughout the rest of the world, the rest of the country and the other places, Yom Echad on the first day of Sukkot. Mishechar of Beis HaMikdash, but once the Churban happened, the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, his skin, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, she'lulav nitl b'Medina Shiva. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai instituted that the lulav should be taken all 7 days of Sukkot. Zecher leMikdash, as a zecher, as a commemoration of the Mikdash. The Mishnah then finishes off and says, "V'shiyeh yom hanof kulei asa." The day of waving will be, the whole day will be asa. Let's look at Rashi to understand what all this means. B'Mikdash Shiva, says Rashi there in Sukkah. The pasuk says that you should celebrate the ceremony of lulav lifnei Hashem for 7 days, for lo bigvulin shivas yomim, but not min haTorah beyond the Beis HaMikdash for all 7 days, just on the first day. V'shiyeh yom hanof. So then a second takana is that shiyeh yom hanof kulei asa. What does that mean? It says Rashi, shel omer, the waving of the omer. Dahainu shisha asa b'Nisan, on the 16th of Nisan, the second day of Pesach. In Israel, of course, the first day of Chol HaMoed. Kulei asa b'chodosh. Chodosh, the new crop, is asa for everyone. And in the times of the temple, once they offered up the carbon omer, they were then able to eat chodosh, the new crop. But once the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, it became mutter to eat the new crop, the chodosh, from daybreak, from the first thing in the morning. Like the Gemara says in Menachos and Daf Samches. Because the pasuk says, "Kosov echad omer al etzem hayom hazeh," dahainu hei hamizrach. That means one pasuk tells us that you can eat the chodosh, the new crop, from the very beginning of the 16th of Nisan, when from its mishahei hamizrach. The kosov echad omer ad haviachem, when you bring the carbon omer. Say haketzad. How do you reconcile the different instructions? Which one is it? Concludes the Gemara there, as Rashi cites, bisman deika omer, when there is an omer, i.e., when there's a Beis HaMikdash, ad haviachem. Once you bring the carbon ha'omer, then you can eat chodosh, or bisman deleka omer, and when there's no omer, i.e. there's no Beis HaMikdash, ad etzem, it's the hei hamizrach, it's the beginning of the 16th of Nisan, which gives the green light to eat chodosh. V'os Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai aleim kol hayom. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai then came along and said, no, you're not going to be able to eat the chodosh from the first thing in the morning, but shihei kol hayom also. It should be also the entire day, because in the first time of Gemara, like the Gemara is going to say. Now, we'll come to that soon, what the Gemara says. But that's the background. Now, 3 questions to ask. Question number 1. What is the difference between Zecher Migdash and Zecher Churban? Question number 2. I don't know if you ever thought about this, but after counting the Omer, during Pesach and Shavuos, every day we count 49 days, we count for 49 days, we say Hirotzen She'bone Beis HaMikdash. Why is it that we only say that Yehirotzon after counting the Omer, but not after shaking a lulav? After all, it would be appropriate, seemingly, that just like after we count the Omer, we daven and we say there should be a Beis HaMikdash, we should once again bring the carbon ha'omer. Why not, after shaking the lulav, why don't we say that again the Beis HaMikdash should be rebuilt and we should go back to the original state of play, namely that you only shake the lulav for 7 days in the Beis HaMikdash, and for the Medina and the rest of the world, only 1 day. Why don't we also say that, presumably, this was instituted as a Zecher leMikdash, so why not say that Yehirotzon? Now, a third question is, is this. Why is it that the Mishnah here in Sukkah mentions two takonas, i.e., Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's takona she'eh lulav nitl b'medina shiva, number one, and number two, she'eh yom hanof kulei osa. Why is that takona listed here in the Mishnah in Sukkah? It has nothing to do with Sukkah. It's a din in Omer, which is really a Gemara in Menachos. Its right place is over there. If you take a look at the next box, the Gemara says in Menachos Samaches, the Mishnah says there, Mishekarav ha'omer, huta ha'chodosh miyad. Once you offer up the carbon ha'omer, then you can eat chodosh straight away. Those who are far away from the Beis Hamikdash, they're allowed to eat it from chatzos, because we could assume by chatzos that back in the Beis Hamikdash they've offered up the carbon ha'omer. Mishachara Beis Hamikdash, but once the temple was destroyed, Hiskin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the same Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, instituted Sheyom Hanof Kulei Asa, that the entire day of the 16th, the day of the waving, the day of the ceremony, should be asa for chodosh, and you can't eat until the next day. That's what he instituted. But that is the right place for this Mishnah, for this takana. Why is it even listed in the Mishnah in Sukkah? And really, this is Tosfos Kasha. Tosfos says, if you look at the next box, paragraph 3, Harbe takonas tikkun Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai actually made many takonas. Elahanach tarkti tikkun yachat. But he instituted these two, i.e., that the lulav should be nitl b'medina shiva, Zecher and Migdash, and Yom Hanof kulei asa, he instituted it at the same time. Therefore, Tonahacha Yom Hanof agav gror, and therefore the Mishnah in Sukkah mentions the Yom Hanof together with it. However, says Tosfos in Sukkah there, the Tema, the Menachos Perek Rabbi Shmuel, there in the Gemara in Menachos Daf Samach Amud Aleph, Lo Tani Hanach Lulav agav Hahud Yom Hanof. Why is it that he only mentions the takana of Yom Hanof, that the 16th of Nisan you cannot eat chodosh now that there is no Beis Hamikdash? Why doesn't he mention also there in the Mishnah that lulav nitl b'medina shiva? There are two takonas. One is about the carbon ha'omer, one is about lulav. Why is it the Mishnah in Sukkah lists both, but the Mishnah in Menachos only lists the omer without listing the takana about lulav? And furthermore, as Tosfos here in Sukkah, of a Perek Basra de Rosh Hashanah, in the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, Daf Lamed, Tanya Hanach Tarati v'oy takonas tuva tetikun. He lists there more than two, many takonas Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made. So it's all a bit perplexing. So in short, we have three questions. Question number one, what is the difference between Zecher the Migdash and Zecher the Churban? Question number two, why do we say the Hirotzen Shebana Beis Hamikdash after counting the Omer, but not after shaking lulav? And number three, why does the Mishnah in Sukkah even mention the takana of Yom Hanof? It has nothing to do with Sukkah, and its right place is in Menachos. Okay, to answer this question, we come on to the writings of the Imrei Emes. The Imrei Emes was the third Ger Rebbe. He was the son of the Sfas Emes, and the Sfas Emes in turn was the grandson of the Chidush Harim, the original Ger Rebbe, the brother of the Kotzka, and his primary chassid, and ultimately he took over after the Kotzka passed away, and he started Ger Chasidus. So the Sfas Emes' son, the Imrei Emes, has a beautiful piece on this. But before we understand this Imrei Emes, we need to first see the Gemara in Sukkah to explain a little bit more about the Yom Hanof. Take a look at paragraph 4. Says the Gemara in Sukkah Mem Aleph Amud Aleph, V'shei Yom Hanof, my time. Why is it that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai instituted that you can't have chodosh the entire day 16 post Churban, post Beis Hamikdash? The answer is, says the Gemara in Sukkah, because Meheira Yibone Beis Hamikdash. Please God, the Beis Hamikdash will come along straight away, very quickly. V'yoimru, and people will make the following mistake. Ishtaked, last year, when we were still mourning the loss of the temple, Mila Echalnu Behei HaMizrach, didn't we eat chodosh from daybreak? Hashta Nami Nechel, so this year we'll do the same. Last year, I remember we ate at daybreak. This year we'll do the same. Ve'inu lo yadi, but people won't realize the Ishtaked lo have a Beis HaMikdash. Hey, Mizrach hitir. The reason why we could eat chodosh for breakfast on the 16th of Nisan is because there was no Beis Hamikdash, and the green light was from Heya HaMizrach when daybreak happens, and that's why we were able to eat it first thing. Hashta de'ika Beis Hamikdash, but now there is a Beis Hamikdash, Omer Mateh, it is the Omer which is Mateh, and therefore people may make the mistake and eat Chodosh first thing in the morning, not realizing that they were only allowed to do so because there was no Beis Hamikdash. Now, Meheri Yibona Beis Hamikdash, there'll be a Beis Hamikdash. It's not the daybreak, it's not Hey HaMizrach which is matir, it's the Omer which is matir, and that takes a few hours, and therefore you can't have Chodosh first thing in the morning. It's only later on in the day once they've been makriv the carbon Omer. And therefore, that is the background to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's takana. Says the Imrei Emes, something fantastic. Nira Leima. The Ma'achashet Tikein Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai takonas halulav. Once Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was misakein the takana of lulav Zecher lemigdash, hayu ha'olam atzovim. People were depressed. Midahutzruch lesaken Zecher lemigdash, because once he had to institute that we're going to shake lulav all 7 days, moving sha'agolas terach of timoshech, people understood and people realized that the golas is going to last a long time, and he was right. We're still shaking lulav for 7 days throughout the world, 2,000 years on. And therefore people were depressed, they were so despondent. We've got to institute something to remind us of what happened in the times of the Beis HaMikdash. How sad. And therefore, to counter that despondency, to give a little bit of hope for the Jewish people, Al-Kain says the Imrei Emes, Tikin miyad sheyom hanof kulei asa. He therefore instituted a second complementary takana called Yom Hanof Kulei Asa, that you can't eat Chodosh the entire 16th of Nisan, Mishum de Meheri Bona Beis HaMikdash. Because, please God, the Beis HaMikdash will come around very quickly, or Kamesh Kos Gemara, like I just explained in the Gemara. Validei Kain Lo Nisyashim B'Binei Beis HaMikdash. And that gave some hope for the sadness of the Jewish people, and they wouldn't give up hope about the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash. And that answers Tosfos kasha. The dafka takonos halulav sheyatzovim hutzruch lismei takonos yemanov lechazkom aladei zeh avaloi lehefach. Very geschmack. It says the Imrei Emes. We wanted to know. Tosfos asked, why is it in Sukkah we mention the takana of lulav nitl b'yom avdina shiva, and then we go on mentioning Yom Hanof Kulei Asa, but yet in the Gemara Menachos we only mention Yom Hanof Asa? The answer is, says the Imrei Emes, that after Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was misakein lulav nitl b'mdina shiva Zecher lemigdash, people got so depressed, so despondent. We've got to institute a new practice to remind ourselves what's going to be in the times of the base, what happened in the Beis Hamikdash. That means we're in this for the long haul, and they got very sad. So therefore, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made a complementary second takana called Yom Hanof Kulei Asa, which is actually very positive. That we've got to asa eating chodosh the entire 16th of Nisan, because maybe the Meheri Yibona Beis Hamikdash, the Beis Hamikdash could come around in a flash, in an instant, and therefore people might not realize that you can eat in the times of the Beis Hamikdash only chodosh after you've offered up the carbon omer. Last year we did it from Hey HaMizrach. They'll make that mistake. But the whole concept, the whole takana of Yom Hanof Kulei Asa is to give hope to the Jewish people and to compensate for the sadness of Lulav Nitl Medina Shiva. So says the Imrei Emes. The Rabbi Soloveitchik, Rabbi Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik, describes the difference between Zecher LeMikdash and Zecher LeChurban in the following way. Zecher LeChurban, he says, is to commemorate the Churban and the sadness of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Masha'en Kein Zecher LeMikdash is to commemorate the running, to remind ourselves what actually took place in the Beis Hamikdash, and therefore they have a different flavor. The Zecher LeChurban, to commemorate the Churban and the sadness of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, that's really the Gemara in Bab Basra Daf Samach Amud Aleph. Let's learn the Gemara together and we'll bring it out a bit more clearly. Says the Gemara in Bab Basra Daf Samach Amud Beis, Ton Rabbanon, famous Gemara. K'shecharav habayis b'shnia, when the second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Rabbi Purushim b'Yisrael shlo lechel basav l'shlishlis yain. Many people, many holy, pure people, wanted to keep all the restrictions of the 9 days, no meat, no wine, etc., throughout the year. Nitz belohen Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua engaged them in conversation. Amar lahen, Bona, my dear children, why aren't you eating meat and drinking wine? Should we really eat meat that will remind us of that was what was offered up on the base on Mizbeach, the carbonus. V'achshav bottle. So how on earth can we eat meat? There's no carbonus anymore. Nishte yain shemenaschen al gabi ha-mizbeach. Should we drink wine which was offered up on the Mizbeach? V'achshav bottle, and now there's no Mizbeach. Amar lohem. So Rabbi Yeshua said to them, Im kain, for that, if that's the case, using your same logic, lechem lo nechel, we shouldn't eat bread. Shekvar botlu menachas, because after all, there are no menachas anymore. So they said, Efshe b'peris, okay, you're right, we won't have bread, we'll eat fruit. So then he said to them, well, peris lo nechel, you can't eat fruit, because shekvar botlu bikurim, there's no bikurim anymore. So Efshe b'peris acherim, okay, bikurim is only the shivas haminim, we'll eat apples and oranges, we'll eat other fruit. So then he said, well, mayim lo nishta, you can't drink water. Shekvar bottle nisach hamayim. What about the nisach hamayim ceremony? You're using your logic, you shouldn't be able to drink water. So then they realized that that's impossible. Shosku, they were silent. Not to have meat and wine is one thing, but no bread and no water, that's going to be an impossibility. Amelohen, so Yeshua said to them, Bonai, my dear sons, Boyu v'oimelochem, let me tell you, not to mourn on Yerushalayim is impossible. The Beis HaMikdash has been destroyed, and of course we have to mourn. But to overmourn, that's also not right. You can only impose manageable restrictions on the Jewish people. This is what the Chachamim have instituted as a Zecher l'Churban. The person should lime his house with sid. When he limes his house with sid, he leaves a Zecher l'Churban. He leaves how much? For Kama Amar Yosef Amma Alamo, an Amma Alamo square at the entrance as he comes into his home. There are lots of halachas on this, and I think that I've got another shir on Torah anytime about this very topic. But I have a friend, my dear friend and cousin, that they moved into a new home, and it was all decorated. So la halacha they don't need to. But his wife wasn't interested in kulas, and the first thing she did is she walked into the house opposite the entrance. She measured up an amma and scraped away the paint to have a real reminder of this Zecher l'Churban. Omer of Chisda continues the Gemara there in Bab Basra, Keneged HaPesach opposite the entrance to the house. Furthermore, you can prepare all aspects of your meal, but it shouldn't be, too comprehensive. It shouldn't be. Something should be missing. Maihi, Omer of Papa Kasset the house on a certain dish. A woman can put on all her jewelry, but she should leave off one thing. She shouldn't look. It's not perfect. There's something missing. That's the point. There should be something chaser. Maihi, what is that? Omerav bas tzida, something a sort of decoration she puts on her head, some sort of jewelry. Shnema meshkach Yerushalayim tishkach yemini tidbak l'sheni lechiki. Ma'al v'sh simchos Rabbi Yitzchok ze eif makish v'sh chasanim. Where'd you put that? Heichach monoklu b'mokum tefillin. V'chol ha'mizabel Yerushalayim zoiche v'roya b'simchosa. Whoever mourns on Yerushalayim will merit to see its happiness once again. Either way, this Gemara is talking about Zecher l'Churban. They tell the famous story with the Baba of Rebbe, Reb Shleima, that one time he was doing some building work in his house, and a non-Jewish black workman came. He was commissioned to do the work, and the painting was going to be there for several days. On the first morning, he rocks up, and he had some bad experiences, sadly, in New York. And he comes into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe says, "Before you start, I'd like to sit down to discuss it with you." And he knew what was coming. Pesach Kron, I think, tells this story. He should be well. The fellow said, "I know what's going to happen now. The Rebbe's going to give it to me. He's going to warn me not to leave early, not to be honest, and not to touch anything." And the Rebbe said nothing of the sort. The Rebbe sat down with him and said, "I want to tell you something. 2,000 years ago, we had a Beis HaMikdash. It's been now, sadly, no longer. And since then, there's no such thing as perfection in this world. And therefore, you do the best thing. But if you miss a little bit, or a bit of paint falls on the carpet, don't worry. It's not the end of the world." And then he said to him, "Tell me, have you had breakfast yet?" And it so happened he hadn't. And the Baba V'Rav, the Shlomo Halberstam, went into the kitchen, scrambled him an egg himself, and gave it to his non-Jewish worker. Because that's the point. There's got to be the feeling of something chaser. First of all, you see the remarkable sensitivity and kindness of the Baba Rebbe. But you see that's the point. There's no perfection anymore. And that's really what Zecher l'Churban is, to commemorate the Churban and the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. We now have 3 answers to our 3 questions. What is the difference between Zecher l'Mikdash and Zecher l'Churban? We've said. So the Gemara sometimes calls it Zecher l'Mikdash, but it could mean both. But Zecher l'Churban, as expressed in the Gemara Babasra, is to commemorate the Churban and the destruction, the sad destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Zecher l'Mikdash is a bit different. It's to commemorate and to remind us about the operation, the functioning of the Beis HaMikdash. So, for example, the Nittel Lulav Yom Zayah for 7 days, that's Zecher l'Mikdash. That's to remind us what actually happened in the Beis Hamikdash, and therefore that answers the second question: Why do we say Yirotzen Shibon Beis Hamikdash after counting the Omer, but not after shaking the lulav? Because after counting the Omer is more of a Zecher lechurban. We're doing it very differently to how it was done in the Beis Hamikdash. In the times of the Beis Hamikdash, they'd offer up a carbon. Nowadays, we simply just count. So therefore, it's a very pale facsimile. It's a very distant to what actually happened in the Beis Hamikdash, and therefore it's more of a Zecher lechurban, and therefore it's appropriate at the end of counting the Omer to long and to say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, please Hashem, rebuild the Beis Hamikdash, we can do the carbon Omer properly. Mashe'en Kain, lulav is more of a Zecher of what actually took place in the Beis Hamikdash. We remind ourselves for 7 days, this is what they did in the Beis Hamikdash. They shook lulav all 7 days, and that's more Zecher l'mikdash. And that's why also, and then the third answer, of course, is, the third question is, what we discussed, why does the Mishnah in Sukkim even mention Takonos Yom HaNof, like we said, to give chizuk to the Jewish people? But it also explains why there are different psukim. The Gemara Rabbi Basra, when it describes why we do these practices, it marshals the pasuk V'meshkochei Yerushalayim Tishkach Yemini. Yet the Gemara in Sukkah says Min Olam Da'avdin Zecher L'Migdash Om Rabbi Yochanan Domakra Ki Ale Aruch Halochem Kasayche Poeich L'M Hashem Ki Tzion Hi Derish Ein Lo Michlal D'Boy Drisha. Different psukim, because there's 2 different takonas. There's Zecher L'Migdash and Zecher L'Churban. Fascinating. I'll conclude with this, that we've seen, according to the Imre Emes, that the reason why the Mishnah in Sukkah makes 2 takonas, lists 2 takonas, one is because the Lulav Nittel B'Mdina Shiva could lead to some sort of yush in the Jewish people. Despondency. We've got to make a takona to remind ourselves we're in this for the long haul. And therefore the Yom HaNof should compensate because Meheri Yibon Beis HaMikdash. Let me share with you one final thought about Meheri Yibon Beis HaMikdash. I heard this years ago from Rabbi Zecher Frand, but I think about it often around Tisha B'Av time. He contrasts 2 boys who their feelings about Tisha B'Av and Meheri Yibon Beis HaMikdash. The first boy is probably much the same as many of us. One time in camp, after the Rabbi was giving shir, he went to the Rabbi very honestly, and he said to the Rabbi, I'm not feeling it. How can I tap into the feeling of Golus, of Churban? Life is good. Mashiach should come, but after Ben Azmanim, after the holiday period, after camp. That's the reality for many of us. Contrast him to another young man. One time, a Rabbi in a summer camp in America was giving shir, and he was trying to engage, of course, like any Rabbi, was trying to engage all the kids. And there was one kid he wasn't connecting with. The kid was dead to the world, he was glazed eyes, he wasn't engaging in shir. And this was going on for weeks. And suddenly, the Rebbe came across the Gemara we've mentioned today, that Meheri Yibon Beis HaMikdash. And suddenly this kid came to life. His eyes lit up. He said, really, Rebbe? Meheri Yibon Beis HaMikdash, Mashiach will come so quickly? The Beis HaMikdash could be built so quickly? And the Rebbe said, yeah. And from that moment that he sort of flicked a switch in the kid, he excited him, he was engaged. The Rebbe was astonished. He went to the camp director and he said to the camp Rav, he said, this is what happened, can you explain it? And the camp Rav, I think it was Rav Nissen Wulpin, said, let me explain it to you. This young man, sadly, has lost his mother. And when you mention Meheri Yibon Beis HaMikdash, he associates that with Tchias HaMesim, and therefore he's going to see his mother again. When he heard that Moshiach could come in an instant, Meheri, we institute this practice because he could come so quickly, they'll make a mistake from last year, etc. That suddenly gave him tremendous chizuk. And that's what switched him on again. And that's really what we hope for. In Mitzvah Hashem, in these difficult times for Klal Yisrael, we should be Zecher to have Meheri Yibon Beis HaMikdash and Besuras Tovas for all of the Jewish people in the world at large. Thank you.